Hello, everybody. If you're listening to this, it must be Monday. Um, this is a recording that's going to work for you for the next 2.5 days. Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday morning are asynchronous work days. That means we do not have live class sessions, but you still have things to do. So I'm going to go through this recording and these lessons, last few lessons. You will have some assignments to do. You may be able to finish them in one day. It may take you 3 days. Okay. But everybody should have enough to keep them busy. You should be spending about 45 minutes each day on history class. Except for Wednesday, should be probably around 20 to 30 minutes. So we're going to be covering here the last two lessons in Unit 4, Lessons 9 and Lessons 10, and those are both in Chapter 39. Before we get into the lesson, let me just review our schedule one more time so you know what you are to be doing this week. So today is Monday. You are to do whatever assignments are in this recording, and it will be in your class announcements as well. The same thing for Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, you're only required to be logged into school for the morning. Every day, check your class announcements, check your emails. Your teachers will be sending you your assignments that way. One of these days, you're going to be having a parent-teacher conference. These are very important, so check your email for those times. Then you will be on break for our Thanksgiving holiday from Wednesday afternoon, and then Thursday, Friday, and also Monday, we do not have school. You will return to your regular class schedule on Tuesday, November 28th. So here's the things that we're going to cover this week for history class. We're going to talk about immigrant population. We're going to talk about some things that changed during the late 1800s and early 1900s as far as the way that we elect senators and our voting process, and just some general information about our history and the progressive movement at that time. So here's your to-do list. This is an important slide. If you go into the online school, these slides are available under the lessons, Unit 4, Lesson 9, and Lesson 10. But you can always come back to this page right here to check off and make sure that you have done everything on this list. So the first thing is, if you have not read Chapter 39, you should be doing that first. The Edpuzzle recording, you're watching that right now, so you're good to go on that. There will be graded assignments for Lessons 9 and 10. Look in your online school, just like always. All the links that you might need for this lesson will be in the recording as we go along. Remember to log into Edpuzzle, the first initial of your first name, your last name, and the number 6. So mine is rlove6. Everybody's password is the same. Okay, so let's move along here. Go ahead and follow as I read. One more thing before I start. It's possible that this recording will be run out of time before I finish. If that is the case, you will need to look for part 2 in Edpuzzle. Okay? All right, here we go. Let's read. The urban America we know today began taking shape in the late 1800s. Changes in society and an increase in population led to the rapid growth of cities. During that period, millions of immigrants arrived in the United States and many moved into urban areas. Urban means city. By 1914, as many Americans lived in cities as in rural. So by the beginning of 1900s, we have the same number of people living in cities as we have living in farm areas. All right, so here's a little seek and find activity for you. I want you to grab your book and see if you can find the answer to this question. The 1900 census. Remember, I told you last week what a census is. we said the Census Bureau counts things in our country. Well, every few years they count people. So in 1900, all the people were counted in the United States, and it showed that America had how many people. So I want you to go into your book in chapter 39 and see if you can find the correct answer. Pause this video and then come on back after you have found the answer. All right, so I'm not going to tell you the answer. This is something you may want to write down in your history journal. Once you have found that answer, write down how many people were living in America in the year 1900. And I have a hint here to help you find it. Write that down. Oh, there's the answer. I decided to be nice and give you the answer anyway. I tricked you. So 76.2 million people. No other nation had ever grown this fast in the history of the world. So when we talk about a number of people that live in a certain area, we're talking about population density. So I do want you to pause this video, grab your history journal, and write this down. Population density is the term that describes the average number of people in an area of a given size. It is calculated by dividing the number of people in the area by the size of the area, frequently expressed as the average number of people per square mile. So go ahead and pause and write down this definition and then come on back. Okay, so we're going to do a little activity here so you can see what the population density is. How do we figure it out? Okay, well, here's the formula here. Miss Fletcher would be so happy we're doing math and history. Our formula is population density is equal to the population divided by the area in square miles. So if we go to this example here, in the year 1870, there was 1,443,000 people in the United States. And if in an average area of 25 square miles, we divide that by 25, and then we find the answer. The answer would be 57,720. Okay. Since I'm not in the Blackboard room, I can't write on the board. I can't write the answer there, but it's 57,720. So I took this number and I divided it by this number. And that tells us the population density in that year. For every 25 square miles, there is 57,720 people living. So what I want you to do now is see if you can figure out the population density for the year 1880. And then I'll just have you skip down and do one more. Figure out the population density for the year 1910. So we're dividing the population, take this number and divide it by this number. So pause the recording and see what you figure out on those. Okay, so if you did 1880, you should have come up with a number of 53,306. And then for the year 1910, you should have come up with the number 30,690. Okay. So why am I making you do this? Well, I want you to understand of how we count people. It's not like it's hard to count people in the country because everybody's not standing in the same place at the same time. So they're estimating numbers. But what's important to realize during this time is how our growth has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger over the years. Okay, and it continues to grow today. All right, so the population density of New York City. Let's take a look at that today. What would it be like today? Well, today, New York City covers 305 square miles and has a population of 8.5 million people. So if we divide 8.5 million divided by 305, we would say the population density is 27,869 people. So within a square mile, that's how many people there are. That is a lot of people in one city. All right, so the point of that is just to realize our country is growing and growing and growing, and today we are still growing. Now, if we go back to the time period in which we're learning about, we know that we are changing from a rural country to an urban country. Remember, it used to be everybody lived in farms, but now we have big cities growing. And fewer Americans are now farming their own lands. Remember, we learned how the farmers became businessmen, and now they're growing crops for all people, not just for themselves. And people are leaving farms and moving to cities to find jobs and better opportunities. But with those positive things, we also had some negative things. With the growth of cities came crime, poverty, and other problems. All right, so at this point, you will hopefully will pop up in a second a link to BrainPop. You need to log in using your own BrainPop login. And I want you to watch the video about the Industrial Revolution. So when you finish watching that, come on back. Okay, so the Industrial Revolution now has determined a lot of very fast growth in our urban areas. A lot of it is for good reasons, but there were some problems. And people began to recognize what the problems were. So we have a couple of more definitions here I would like you to write down. So you're going to grab your journal once again, and we're going to write down these two definitions. The first one is progressivism. Political and social reform movement of the late 1800s and early 1900s. That included socialism, the labor movement, municipal reform, prohibition, and other movements. Now, some of these things we've already learned about. We've already learned about the labor movement when we talked about Samuel Gompers and Mother Jones. And we did talk about how many of the government programs are beginning to change. Some of these other things we'll learn about in the future. So write that one down. The other one I want you to write down is just the word progressive. A progressive is a person who thinks that life can be improved by government reform. So go ahead, jot those down, and then come on back. At some point, I think I'm going to run out of time on this recording, and I will have to move on to part 2. So when this stops, just go into Edpuzzle and look for part 2. All right, now that you have the definitions written down, we're going to take a closer look of what the progressive era is. Okay, the progressive era covers this time period. Life was changing rapidly in the United States. A new middle class had emerged. Americans had more leisure time, but some groups were left out, and change created new problems. The populists had made Americans aware of the problems. The progressives began to do something about them. The populists came before the progressives. Both groups focused on the problems in society. However, most populists were farmers who wanted to go back to rural values. The populists identified problems. The progressives were reformers, writers, and lawmakers. What a time of haves and have-nots. While some Americans were benefiting from new inventions and leisure time, others were being left out in the cold. But the reform-minded progressives had some new ideas for fixing the country's woes.